Hello, my name's Julian Edgar and I'm the author of this book, Designing and Building a New Energy Efficient Home. What I want to cover in today's video are the huge advantages of having thermal mass in your passive solar home, and quite a lot of it too. Let's take a look. So thermal mass, I think, is the single most important ingredient in the passive solar home recipe. It's not the only ingredient. You also need to have northern window area. You also need to have an insulated envelope. You also need appropriate ventilation and so on. But if you take away thermal mass, the home will never work effectively. It's that important an ingredient. If I were a cook, I'd be able to say the equivalent in a scone recipe, but since I'm not a cook, I can't do that. But here is the one really essential ingredient in having your home work effectively. Let's take a look at it, and let's take a look at why I have said what I've just said. So thermal mass works in both summer and winter. In summer, the thermal mass absorbs heat from inside the house, keeping the air cooler. It's a lot cooler than it would be without the thermal mass. That stored heat, that heat that's gone into the thermal mass, is then removed at night by opening the house and letting cool air come through. So to work in summer, you need to be in a climate that has sufficient diurnal range, the difference between maximum temperature during the day and minimum temperature at night, and that has to be at least 10 degrees Celsius, and if it's 15 or 20, that's even better. So it works in summer to keep your home cooler, and in winter it absorbs heat. The thermal mass absorbs heat from sunshine entering the house through the windows, and then it releases that heat as the house cools, keeping the internal air temperature warmer. So to work in winter, you need to have the entrance of winter sunshine, which is one reason you have all those northern windows. You stop the sun coming in those windows in summer by having eaves that shade them. All right, so thermal mass sounds like it has all these magical properties, doesn't it? Keeps your house warmer in winter and cooler in summer, but what actually are examples of thermal mass? Well, oops, there it is. Well, in our home, the thermal mass, the main thermal mass, is simply the concrete slab, the floor slab on which the house was built. Simple as that. The concrete, any concrete, has the ability to absorb lots of heat, which can keep the house cooler, and release lots of heat, which keeps the house warmer. And the only difference that our concrete slab has over the specifications that the engineer designed it with is it's got edge insulation. It's got 75mm thick XPS insulation around the outside. If you look closely, you can just see it around the outside here. Inside the formwork, the concrete was poured directly against it. Now, our home has a couple of other examples of internal thermal mass as well. It has two of these water tanks, each of which contain 2,000 litres of water, 2 tonnes of water. Water is extremely good as thermal mass. It takes lots of energy to raise 1 litre of water by 1 degree C, so it draws that energy out of the air and dumps it back into the air. And we also have a couple of brick feature walls in our house. Now, they were there mainly for aesthetics. We like the idea of having the Canberra red old bricks, but they also act as thermal mass. The rest of the internal walls of the house are just normal stud frame and insulation, so have very, very little thermal mass. Now remember, the thermal mass has to be inside the insulated envelope of the house, and that's why it has insulation around the outside of the slab to keep it inside the insulated envelope. All right, so what makes it all so good? Well, the first advantage, and it is a critical advantage, is that much thermal mass is just part of the normal house build, so it doesn't cost you anything extra. Now, when you start investigating energy efficient homes in Australia, you will be confronted with numerous demands for special things that cost a lot. Special windows from Europe, even sometimes triple glaze, special external doors, special ceiling materials so the house is airtight, excuse me, and then a special ventilator that you need because otherwise you can't breathe decent quality air because you've just made the house airtight, and so on and so on. Each of those things adds cost, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra cost. But thermal mass doesn't need cost you anything. If it's the concrete floor slab, which was already going to be present, it's cost you no more extra other than the cost of the insulation around the edge, which is absolutely trivial cost. If your house is already going to have internal brick walls, it hasn't cost you anything extra. They're already there. Now, some extra thermal mass that you might choose to put in might cost a small amount, but it's tiny in the context of the whole cost of the house. It might be $5,000, not $200,000 or $300,000. And an example is if we have a look over here, house in construction, we can see there's a little water tank in my home office. It's basically acts as a coffee table. It has a timber rounded edge top. And in this case, it acts as a solar collector as well. Look at it in winter. You can see it's in the direct sunshine coming in from the north. So it's helping to store heat, gather heat and store it to help keep the home office warmer at night in winter. Now, I don't have the cost of that tank off the top of my head, but it certainly wasn't very much. It's just a standard custom-built ColourBond water tank. You can get them made in any size and nearly any shape, and they're not very expensive. Obviously, the water to fill it is basically no cost at all. So the huge first advantage of thermal mass is it's either free, it's included already in the build of the house, or its cost is absolutely minimal. And that is a huge advantage in energy efficient home design. The second one, just waiting for that slide to appear, there it is. The second huge advantage of thermal mass is ease of use. Basically, you don't do anything. The only thing you have to do, because you have a house that's using thermal mass, is in summer open the house at night so cooling breezes can come through and reduce the temperature of the thermal mass. You don't do anything in winter except open the curtains in the morning and close them at night. You don't do anything in autumn or spring except open the curtains as you would normally. It just operates all by itself. There's no remote control, there's no switch, there's no thermostat. The cooler the inside of the house compared with the thermal mass, the more heat transfer that will automatically occur. The warmer the inside of the house compared with the temperature of the thermal mass, the more energy movement the other way that will occur. You don't do anything. It's just doing it all by itself, except for, as I say, opening the doors and windows in summer at night to let air come through the house and cool the thermal mass. So the house is basically doing it nearly all by itself because it's such a fundamentally good design that works with nature rather than trying to exclude nature. I do think that you can really think about different architectural approaches to energy efficient homes. There are many that just try and block nature out and try and exclude it. Whereas this approach doesn't do that. It actually is making use of temperature fluctuations that occur naturally in the climate to make the house work with the climate rather than against it. So ease of use is a second huge advantage. The third major advantage is most thermal mass, not all, but most thermal mass is diffuse. It's spread throughout the house and it's omnipresent. It's everywhere around you. So think of a concrete slab floor. You are always in contact with the floor. You're not levitating. It is around you the whole time. Think of internal brick walls. They are around you as well. Now, our house doesn't have internal brick walls except for the feature walls. Why not? Simply because it would have cost more. Okay, the timber and insulation and plasterboard interior walls are cheaper than having internal brick walls. So in this case, we don't have those. We have the concrete floor, we have the water tanks, we have the feature brick walls. But even so, it's all distributed throughout the house. Now, that means you don't walk into a cold room or a hot room because the rooms are being heated by the action of the thermal mass, the concrete slab being the primary part of that. And so it's everywhere in the house. Okay, it's a very different feel in a house because what's controlling the temperature is everywhere around you, not just a machine in the corner blowing out cold air or hot air. It's a very, very different feel. And part of that difference in feel is because the temperature difference between the inside air and the thermal mass is always small, it acts without your noticing it. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you measure the temperature of the slab, it might be, say, 22 degrees. And outside it's 40 degrees, the slab's at 22, the inside air temperature might be at 24. They are real figures that I've actually measured. So the inside air temperature is only 2 degrees more than the slab. There is heat exchange occurring. The slab is being heated by the internal air, but because the temperature differences are very small, you don't notice it occurring. It's just occurring there all the time. I did find when I was in an online discussion once that people had completely the wrong idea about how all this worked, and they saw the water tank, which I've shown you a picture of earlier, and they said, oh, is that really hot? Like it was full of boiling water, and that's what heated the house, you know, the hot water, like a steam radiator or something, but it's nothing like that. The temperature differences are tiny between thermal masses and internal air, and while there are massive heat exchanges occurring, it's almost imperceptible to the person actually living in the home. It just is occurring all the time in the background. So it's diffuse and it's omnipresent. Advantage 4. This is a really, really important one. And I hadn't realised how important it was until we built the house and I could actually feel it. The advantage number 4 is that thermal mass works with the human body's radiant heat exchange. Now, if you look across at that diagram, excuse me, over here, we can see different ways in which people, humans, exchange heat with their environment. We can see that 15% is via convection. We can see that 20% is via evaporation, for example, of your sweat. But a really big one, 60%, and I know it doesn't add up to 100 because you've also got a bit of conduction, but 60% of the heat transfer that we have with our environment is via radiation. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you're in a cold environment, your body is radiating heat to that environment around you, and the colder the surfaces are around you, the more heat you will radiate to them and the colder you will feel. In summer, that might be a positive. If you are surrounded by cool surfaces, you will radiate more heat to those cool surfaces than you would if they were hot. Now, think about thermal mass. In summer, the thermal mass around you is cooler than air temperature and much cooler than your skin temperature. So it might be 24 degrees air temperature in the house, but it feels to you much more like it's about 22 degrees. It's a really, really distinct feeling. You go into a passive solar home in summer and it immediately feels cool. And that's because the surfaces around you, especially the thermal mass like the floor, are cooler than you are, and so you radiate heat to them. Now in winter, those surfaces are still cooler than you are, like they're not hot, remember, but you radiate less heat to them than you would if they were cold. And so you end up feeling warmer. So it's quite a subtle thing. And the way I've described it in the book is sort of poetic. When you walk into a passive solar home in winter, you are enveloped in warmth. It's all around you. When you walk into a passive solar home in summer, you are enveloped in coolness. It's all around you. And it's really, really distinct, but how can I describe it? Unusual, because most places aren't like that. Most places, the surfaces are not acting in that way. So in a passive solar home with effective thermal mass, the house feels comfortable. And to give you a concrete example, the highest temperature we've recorded in our house so far, when it was 44.7, I think, outside, is 27 degrees inside. But the thermal mass was only 23 degrees and the house still felt cool. Now, if I were doing lots of physical activity and it was 27, I would have got hot. But sitting around in a chair, I felt fine because all the surfaces around me were still cool. Okay, so that's what I'm describing. It works with human body radiant heat exchange, and radiant heat exchange is the major way that we exchange heat with our environment. This works with that. Advantage number 5, no maintenance ever for most thermal mass. So what do I mean? Well, here's a picture of our house in construction. Here's the concrete floor. I hope we never, ever, ever have to do any maintenance whatsoever. We're going to cover that in ceramic tiles. They're incredibly durable. I would expect, apart from a vacuum and a mop, they'll never need any maintenance. The concrete should never need to be changed or altered or fixed, or a repair person come in the life of the house. And as it happens, outside here are the red bricks that would go to form the feature wall where I've got the mouse now that have yet to be built. That wall should never ever need any maintenance. So it's completely unlike, say, a reverse cycle air conditioner. We expect it to last, 10 years, and they never need to be replaced. Or some sort of central heating system, which, every 10 or 15 years it'll need replacement, and it'll probably need maintenance every 2 years. This is very, very different to that. This is the fabric of the house acting as the heater and the cooler, and most will never need maintenance. Perhaps those water tanks might need maintenance or replacement, but the major thermal mass in the house will never ever need to be repaired or maintained or anything done to it. It's just there. And it might be just there, but advantage 6 is also it just works. Now, in a well-designed passive solar house with thermal mass, it's incredibly effective at reducing temperature swings inside the house, and that's really what we want. So here's a screen grab of my data logging, 36.9 degrees outside, 22.4 inside. And it's the thermal mass that's doing nearly all of that work. The house isn't heavily insulated. It's insulated just to standard NATAS 7 requirements. The two big end rooms with rake ceilings have more insulation in the ceilings than the other rooms, but all the walls are just R2.7, standard 90mm studs. How can the house achieve 22.4 when it's 36.9 outside? No air conditioning running, of course. It's because of the thermal mass. It just works, and it works extraordinarily well. So passive solar, including the action of thermal mass, is all about good fundamental design. It's not about sticking on technological band-aids like special high-performance expensive windows or special ceiling to stop any air movement possible coming in and out of the house, or a special ventilator that's then needed, or all of these special, expensive, exotic, esoteric stuff. None of that's actually needed. This house is built with all standard building materials from local building suppliers. There is not one thing in this house that was special or expensive or exotic or cutting edge or any of those other things that people who want you to buy expensive goods are always telling you that you need. Everything is absolutely straightforward. It comes back to the design of the house. That is what is important, and thermal mass is an intrinsic part of that design. The book's called Designing and Building a New Energy Efficient Home. It's not out yet. It'll be out mid-2026 or perhaps towards the later part of 2026. I'm waiting until I have full data logging of every aspect of the house for a full 12 months, so through every season. I currently, at the time of doing this video, have spring and summer data, and it performed extremely well. I'm waiting now for autumn and winter data. When all of that is available, the book will be out, and as you'd expect, it covers everything that I've been talking about in this video in a lot of detail. Thank you.